Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of My First Dollar. I am Taryn Arnold with Buy Me Coffee, and this week I am very excited to be joined by someone who every creator knows or needs to know. Jay Clouse is an entrepreneur, a podcast host. He writes a newsletter, and he is above all extremely passionate about teaching creators and freelancers around the world how to thrive as a business owner. He kind of does it all. Jay, welcome. Welcome to the
Taryn, that was a
show.
great intro. Actually,
I
I need to
mean,
watch I need to watch this recording myself to write that down to give to other people to use because there's so many things that I do and everyone like tries to go down this giant list of like he's doing A, B, C all the way to like K. But that was good.
What's K? What is like too much for you when people get down there? You're like, we don't need to.
I think it's a documentary. We
Yeah.
kind of randomly made a documentary a couple years ago, and when that comes up in a bio, I'm just like, oh, hold on, like
Now
that
you're
was
confusing people.
that was one time.
Well, hey, cheers. Thanks so much for joining. Do you have some
Hey,
coffee with you?
I
Yeah.
do.
What a fun little mug you have. I love
This is
that.
Podia's mug.
Oh, fun. Mine is an I'd rather be in Pittsburgh mug because my girlfriend is from Pittsburgh. That would be very
Yeah.
random if it was any other any other reason.
Midwest. I love the Midwest. I'm
We
in the
love it.
Midwest. Is
Oh, where
Pittsburgh?
where are you?
I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and now
Ah,
I'm kind of questioning, is Pittsburgh considered Midwest? It's definitely like in the Midwest VC conversation,
I'm
but
not
it
one to ask.
doesn't feel
No.
very West.
It doesn't have the vibe. It doesn't have the Midwest vibe in my mind. Wow. I love that for us. Well, cheers to being maybe in the Midwest when we're in Pittsburgh.
And the great news is, in
Yes.
this podium mug is my second cup of coffee, which I left on
Oh,
the burner for almost 2 hours, and it was very burnt, but I seem to have gotten the right amount of creamer, and it's
wow.
good.
Or what kind of creamer are you? What kind of guy are you with your creamer? Are you like an oat milk?
No, because my actual coffee maker is really bad.
Mhm.
I was like given it on a fishing trip. Like it's one of those throwaway coffee machines you bring on a fishing trip. Like I can leave this here,
Oh,
but
I
I
see.
was I was still like, living in an up studio apartment and I was like, I'll take it. So anyway, it doesn't make very good coffee. So I use good creamer, which is Chobani, and
Oh,
I think my fiance got us it was like I think it's vanilla cream.
okay. Wow. Jay's a fancy man. That is some, I didn't even know Chobani made creamer. So that's
It's
how
the
you
little
know.
things. It's the little things that get you through the day.
So you talked earlier about you mentioned your intro. I actually had a really hard time like writing it. I don't think it's a standout, but I'm curious, how do you prefer to be? Like what when people say when they're introducing your long list of things that you do, what part of it are you like, that's the most me, or that's the most right?
I'm kind of distilling things down to writer and podcaster.
Mm-hmm.
And lately, I talk about really the things that I spend my time doing are studying creators
Mm-hmm.
and building community online.
Mm-hmm.
That's those are the two things that kind of stand out. So you have like this 2x2 matrix of like writing, podcasting, studying creators, building community, and all those things kind of intersect in certain ways. But
Totally.
writer and podcaster, I'm more and more identifying with just the idea of being a creator
Mm.
because for a long time, my identity was like entrepreneur. And I think entrepreneurs are a subset of creators. Like
Mm-hmm.
some creators are entrepreneurs, but not all creators are entrepreneurs.
Totally.
And now I identify more with creator because it gives me more latitude in how I spend my time. Like if I take a part-time job or even a full-time job, that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
take away from me being a creator. And that's
Totally.
nice.
Totally. I was curious how you got started in the creator space. It's such a niche space, and to know it so well means that you've been in it, or you've at least had your head in it for a while. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. I had this like prevailing narrative that I told myself for years, which was that I was not creative. I
Mm,
thought I was like really great at like being operational and getting things done, but I needed other people's ideas to like take action on.
hmm
And I worked with a creative coach or a business coach, just call him a coach. And he helped me identify that like tape that I was playing in my head.
Yeah.
And to get over that, I had to prove myself wrong. And my means of doing that was to start writing every day.
Hmm.
And because I know how my brain works, I needed external accountability to make that true. And so I just started sharing that as an email every day through MailChimp to, subscribers.
Mm.
And that like squashed that lie I was telling myself. and started to like open the door to try new things. Like if I wanted to start a podcast, I now felt confident that I could do that. So I started podcasting in 2018. The writing thing started in early 2017, really.
Okay.
And I had written before that, but it was like that period of your life where like you write one blog post and you feel really good about it, then you write another one, and then you're like, this is really hard, and you don't write anything for like 6 months. But 2017, I started writing very, very consistently. And then 2018, I started the first podcast. And then last year, I started Creative Elements, which is like the most successful of the things that I've done so far.
It's amazing.
And it's just a muscle, you get more confident that you can do a thing. Even if the thing isn't something you've done before, like you get more confident that you can figure it out. And that just comes with like getting reps at stuff.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, at what point, well, tell me about studying creators too. Like where did that come in? Were you kind of just studying yourself?
Just getting very introspective all the time. Well, it's because that's like the aspirational life for me. Like how could you ask for a better life than making a living from like the things that you compulsively just want to make, and people saying, I like this and I'm going to support you through purchasing your product or subscribing to your membership, or even just, patronage. Like I rolled out Buy Me a Coffee because it kind of felt like, why not? And I've been just like blown away by how generous people are. Studying creators kind of started with Creative Elements, the podcast that I'm doing now, because my first podcast was related to venture capital and investment, which is like really fun for me. And I really enjoy it, but it's pretty far removed from the typical stuff I'm doing on a daily basis and like the world that I live in. And I loved audio. So I was like, I want to start another podcast, but I want to have it in the world of creators. And I had this insight, which was I've built some close enough relationships with people in that space that are pretty impressive, but I've never had any reason to like collaborate with them.
Right.
And a podcast talking to people like them just seemed like a really great solution for that. And all these people who go on these shows, like I'll talk to Seth Godin and James Clear, and today's guest is Cole Kushna. He has a podcast called Dissect. Most of these people, when they go on podcasts, they talk about their thing. Like James Clear will talk about habits. But I wanted to talk to people like James about how did you make a living writing? Like how did you get to do this full time? And that's what Creative Elements does, is basically dive into that for creators. Not a lot different than what you're doing here, Taryn.
Wow. Well, turns out I'm the new host of Creative Elements. So sorry.
This is a special crossover episode.
How did you become seen as an expert in this space? Because I imagine there's quite a jump of, starting to learn about it, getting your feet wet by doing it, by learning about it. And then at what point did things kind of cross over to where you became this person that people turn to find this information?
I think it's kind of happening like now. I don't think it's even, I would argue that I'm probably not yet. But, for writing for 4 years, people started following me for that. And I just built a lot of trust with those people that have been reading my writing for years. And they've evolved with me as my interests have evolved. And, now I'm just over a year in on Creative Elements. Today I published episode number 52.
Ooh.
And after a year and 50 plus episodes of talking to really impressive people, the people who at least follow that podcast or know that I'm doing it, they start to look to me to say, well, you've seen some patterns,
Totally.
Because it's really fascinating actually, because I get to look at two things. I get to look at the medium, like writing versus podcasting versus video. And then I also get to look at platforms, Instagram, YouTube, email. And all these creators that I talk to are some mix of those things.
Right.
So there's like a future here where I do the show for a couple of years and I'm going to have like some really interesting data here to pull together and be like, here's what I've learned about being on YouTube, or here's what I've learned about video, or both. You'll be able to search for like, I want to listen to your episodes that are writers, or I want to listen to your episodes of people who use ConvertKit. It can be very specific in that way.
Why do you think creators are so hungry for this information?
Because it's such an aspirational life. It's easy. It's really easy to even imagine yourself in their shoes, because like we're all making something, right? And so you can imagine like, if I just had more people reading this or watching this or, listening to this, it's easy to imagine that future, but it's hard to understand the path,
Totally.
because people know that like what I need is just more eyeballs or ears on this thing, but how do I get them? That's so hard.
Right.
And I think that the way to find that path is by looking at other people's paths. And that's true to an extent. But, something I'm finding on the show, a lot of the people we look up to and we're trying to find their path doesn't work anymore because their path worked in 2015 when you could buy Facebook ads for $1 and just blow things up. And like that doesn't work anymore. Or their path started in 2011 when SEO was a completely different game and they were the only blog talking about this thing.
Yeah.
So part of me, like, I want to show that and not like condemn that and say like, this doesn't work anymore, celebrate it.
Right.
But then I also want to, like, I'm trying to secretly use big names on the show to get people to listen and trust me so that I can bring in much lesser known people whose paths are like more relevant and timely.
Totally.
So it's actually useful.
Is there somebody that comes to mind when you say like someone maybe that's smaller but is like kind of crushing it?
Totally. A couple people. I just interviewed Dickie Bush, who his Twitter like is literally blowing up. Like he had 600 followers in August of 2020. When I interviewed him a month ago, he had 10,000. And then by the time I published the interview, 22,000.
Oh my God.
And in that interview, he literally just laid out like, here's what I did. And it was super intentional. Like it wasn't an accident. Like, yes, some of the things took off, but it's because he had like a very specific theory about how to use the platform. Similarly, Anne-Laure Lecomte, who her Twitter's blown up, her blog's blown up, her community's blown up. All that's been in like the last 2 years, So yeah, that's the type of person I want to bring on and learn from right now.
Yeah.
But the challenge is people are much more drawn to known names.
Totally.
Your podcast feed is full of podcast episodes. Which one are you going to click on?
Right. Yeah. It's tough because it's paradoxical to to trust someone that you don't know their name on how to get your name known. it feels
really
weird.
Interesting. Yeah, totally. But I just ran a poll on Twitter and I asked, when it comes to creators, who would you rather learn from? And I had 3 options, and it was like well-known name, notable up-and-comer, and somebody quietly crushing. And somebody quietly crushing was like 50% compared to 10% for the known name.
Ah, interesting.
Which is interesting because people say they want that, but I don't know if that's like their actual behavior when they're making choices.
100%. Yeah.
So you have to find a solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's funny. I have a podcast on the side when I'm being consistent and not thinking about work too much, but it's a hard thing to do. It's like I always think it's so interesting how there are people in your life who are so good at something, but to get people to trust you for that. Oh, hi, kitty.
He's gonna cause a whole problem here. He's gonna jump up here. He's gonna try to get on the mic.
I love how like unassuming he's being. He's like, nothing's wrong here.
Nothing to see here. Don't mind the man in the back. I just fed him 2 hours early to avoid him coming down here and bugging me. But here we go.
You talked about platforms. I know you're on Buy Me a Coffee. Tell me about how you, as a creator and as someone who helps creators do it better, how do you choose where to invest in terms of platforms?
I think you have to think about sustainability in terms of what can I realistically do long term. Because even sitting here today, like I have a decent camera set up here and I know there's an opportunity to do video on YouTube. It drains me to think about the world where I'm creating YouTube videos.
Right.
And that's why I haven't like dove into the platform, because I could do 2, 10, maybe even like 50 out of like pure, I know I should do this, I'm going to do it, but my heart's not really in it. And I think if you have to pull yourself into a space, it's just not going to work, because it's going to show through in your work that like you're not loving it and you're doing it because you feel like you should. And so when you're thinking about platforms, I think you have to think about that. That's why I spend the majority of my time writing, email, and even Twitter, because Twitter is just writing. Audio is something that I love, and that's easy for me to do for a long time, because this is just a super long-term game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think about growth in terms of subscribers and listeners and readers or whatever, and it looks mostly like a flat line, or at least like a very slow build. And I think you get to a point where something happens and growth happens all at once. And then at some level, it's just math, where if you have 2% of your subscribers sharing your work, the more overall subscribers you have, that 2% can be super significant and grow the thing super quickly.
Totally.
But that could take, probably will take years and years and years and years and years, you know?
Is that frustrating for you where you're chatting with people who have either already quote unquote made it in this space or are, someone like you just mentioned, something Dickie Blouse. Bush. There we go. Dickie Blouse. I love that name. Dickie Blouse. Dickie Bush, where they're just kind of exploding. Does it ever, I imagine that if I was trying to grow my subscribers and I'm talking to these people who are doing it, I would at some point be like, when is my break going to come? Or have you had that moment for yourself where you're like, oh, this is happening?
No, I don't think I've had that moment. Like I'm seeing growth all the time, but it very much looks like it's the slow build, and it's felt like a total struggle for forever. And this, I don't know if you're reading my mind or what, but this is like literally something I think about all the time, and it's what I've been writing about a lot lately, because the commonalities that I see that are really clear to me is the people who are breaking through, and when they break through, it's because not only have they been consistent, but they've been super focused on what they do. Like going all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, that long list of stuff Jay's doing, because that's so hard to nail down. It's really hard to be the guy for whatever.
Right.
And I think all the time, like I could construct that. Like I could be the guy who studies creators. And for me to like meaningfully do that, I probably need to change my entire writing strategy to only be profiles of other creators and break down what they're doing. I could also be the guy who helps you build community online. But to do that, like the way the show looks would have to change a lot. So I'm resisting what I know is the shortest path, which is being super specific and doing that for a long time, because it feels not fun and limiting. But it is frustrating because I see people who've been at it for a shorter period of time than I have, and they don't necessarily know things that I don't know in terms of how to do this, but they've just chosen to be specific and really stick to that, and that works.
I respect your path as well, though, because I think I have a lot of friends in this creator space, and just people from working at Patreon for 5 years and then now working with Buy Me a Coffee, where people who chase that, it's not rare that they find themselves in a position that they don't love and with a bunch of followers expecting that thing from.
I'm glad. That's very validating. Thank you for telling me that, because I'm having this conversation with some of my closer friends now. Is like, I see these worlds of like, do I want to be a creator guy? Do I want to be community guy? And I'm kind of just like, I'm not going to be any guy. I'm just going to be me. Yeah. And people are going to follow along for me. And that's not very compelling if you don't know me. Like I can't put up a landing page on my website and say like, do you want to know what I'm up to? People will be like, no, I don't. Who are you? Yeah. But the people who care. It's just like a really slow build.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's one of those things that when you create community the way that you're creating it, people do just care about you because they care about what you care about. It's like they want a little bit of community. They want a little bit of this. They want some of this. They want just like your random what you're doing on a Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I commend you. I think that's smart. But also, if you ever choose to go down the path of just focusing on a thing, I respect that too, because I've had those itches as well, just being hyper specific and hyper focused.
And either way, it's just going to be a whole lot of work. So you got to respect it either way. But I can't imagine just being that specific, because like the people who are doing this really well, I'll look at their feeds, I'll say, and usually it's on Twitter, but it could be Instagram, could be anything.
Yeah.
And it's like the same idea said different ways ad nauseum forever. That feels so exhausting. It's like, I don't want to do that. I just don't. I want to be me.
And you are you, and that's great. Tell me about your journey of making money in this world. What was that like?
Let's see. So I didn't set out to make stuff thinking that it would necessarily work. Like I said, I kind of started this as my own mechanism to prove that I could make stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's see, I'm trying to think about the first like dollar I made that wasn't through services, because I quit my job very close to the time that I started writing in 2017. And then I started facilitating mastermind groups. I called it an accelerator called Unreal Collective. And that really became like a community essentially. But most of my income was from services. And I think my first creator income was sponsorship on Upside, the first podcast that I did. But that was a partnership with somebody else. And it was just like this fun side project. So all the money we made there just went back into the business immediately.
Right.
Man, I should really be able to remember like the first dollar I made otherwise.
I mean, those things count. Like services count. You're creating something, you know?
And at the same, this all happened so quickly because I quit my job, and previous to the job, which was like product management at a venture-backed startup company, I started a software company myself. And so my view of entrepreneurship was actually still pretty narrow. It was like you build software, you sell it, and that's like what entrepreneurship is. And then I kind of discovered freelancing as I quit my job. And then I started building this stuff because to me, I was like, I don't want to trade my time for money for forever. And Unreal like pays the bills and only requires 10 to 15 hours a week. So I have all this time to make other stuff. And that went into writing. It went into the podcast. And I started making courses for LinkedIn Learning. And then I realized I could make courses independently. And I built my 3 freelancing courses, which I'm super, super proud of. And I think that was the first thing that I genuinely tried to sell to my list.
Yeah.
And it went okay. I kind of started pulling in like affiliate links after a while of stuff that I really, really loved. And that started going well at the end of 2020. Like it's just the last few months that's been meaningful.
Interesting.
Also at the end of 2020, I made another course that crushed. I made a podcasting course called Podcast Like the Pros. And that just like such a great experience. We could talk about that. The process of selling that I did way differently than the freelancing courses.
Oh, cool.
And then recently I've been doing workshops and selling those just through ConvertKit to my list. And the latest workshop I did on Friday had 150 people who joined it.
Amazing.
Like it's crazy. So it really feels like all this is happening in the last 6 to 8 months.
Wow. Congrats.
Thanks. But it's like been, all these things fold onto each other, right? Like the newsletter feeds the podcast feeds a newsletter. Both of them kind of feed the courses. And then all of that leads into the workshops. And I wrote some articles last year that rank really well and have some affiliate links to them. And all of it just kind of builds.
Yeah.
And so it's like I took the hard path of pushing 10 boulders uphill at once for like 2 years. And then finally they all started getting to a point at the same time where like, okay, now we're unlocking some revenue.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really kind of bizarre and still like feels not real.
That's how you know that it's working, where it starts. You're like, whoa, is this happening to me? Because this is amazing. That's awesome.
Totally. It's really weird. And then you have all these new questions of like, well, I know if I create a workshop and email my subscribers that I'm doing a workshop, I know that a non-insignificant portion of them will buy. But like ethically, does that mean I should be selling a workshop all the time? I don't think so. You know? And then same with like podcast sponsorship. Now Creative Elements is doing really well. And I get a ton of sponsorship requests. And it's like, okay, but I have a duty to my people. I'm not going to like support a thing that I don't actually like.
Right.
But the opportunity's there. And 2 years ago, I would have been like, holy shit. If I had an extra $500, this would be life-changing right now.
Totally. You just take everything.
Totally.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting in that way.
Interesting. From all your studies and from yourself as a creator, are there some main themes or like a main thing that you think or that you're seeing for successful creative, well-run creative businesses? Like what people are doing that just more often than not, it tends to work well?
Well, I think the like focus path is the most clear pattern that I see as far as like, this is the drum that I beat. I talk about X. I talk about writing. I talk about community, whatever it is. They're doing that. Outside of that, there is the consistency thing. To me, it's really about just like consistently being that person. That's what I'm seeing I'm trying to think of other examples because we've kind of already talked about this, but like bar
Yeah.
none, that is by far and away what I'm seeing the most common success patterns be. But also, I'm starting to see some interesting patterns of like just more human element
Mm.
into that for people. I think we're more and more interested in people as people. I think about like the idea of patronage a lot right now, which is
Yeah.
super relevant to buy me a coffee because we all like essentially run media companies, whether we're monetizing it or not. We all know how good it feels when somebody likes our photo on Instagram or shares our post, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because we can now appreciate other people supporting our work, even in really small ways, it makes us all more likely to support others.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see more and more people supporting creators that they like, that they just feel drawn to. They like,
Totally.
sometimes the stuff they're making is super secondary. It's like, this person speaks like me. They care about the things that I care about.
Mm-hmm.
They took a stand on this issue. It's a totally different landscape. And then in contrast, you look at like the best practices or patterns that people will talk about for product launches through email.
Mm-hmm.
And that still works, but I don't think it works for our demographic. Like,
Hmm.
I think it works for people who are a little less fluent in internet culture.
Yeah.
Because if you're fluent in internet culture, like you've just seen this a ton of times now, and you know what
Right.
they're doing, and you know how it works, and you feel a little bit, it feels impersonal in a way
Totally.
that you're doing this to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm finding way more success when I just write as me
Mm-hmm.
and I say, by the way, I'm doing a workshop this week. Like that's
Right.
so much more effective than like
Yeah.
a 3 email sequence where I talk about the pain you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And then I follow up with like, let me make that pain even more painful. And then the next day I'm like, I have a solution though.
Aha,
Like
some
that just
medicine.
doesn't work anymore. Like, you know what you're feeling. And I know that too. And I'm having a conversation with you, whether it's through audio or through writing. And
Mm-hmm.
I know you're reading this and you're going to see this link. And if you see that and you want that, cool. But I'm not going to push it on you. Like, it's discoverable. And I
Totally.
think people relate to that across all mediums, across all creators. That type of soft sell, I think, is what's working better than the typical open cart launch type promotion.
Totally. Interesting. Yeah. It and that's hard when even if you're not selling something and you're just creating something, it's hard to you're like, just watch what I did. Watch it instead of like, hey, it would really mean a lot to me if you did X, Y, and Z. But it's, yeah, it's really interesting when you were saying that you kind of get like almost annoyed at people using older tactics. I used to love when companies they would send an email and it would be a mistake and they'd be like, oops, we didn't mean to send this. Sorry for blah, blah. And I was like, that's so clever. And now when I get it, I'm like, you guys really sat there and wrote some like botched email just knowing that you're going to send me a promo code the next day. It drives me
That's
crazy.
crazy. I haven't even seen that. I'm so averse to opening up any email from like a brand. I literally just don't. I don't buy things online, to be honest. Like I support creators and I buy like information products and experiences and things, but I literally haven't opened an e-commerce email in years.
Oh my God. I
Like,
would
I'm
love
telling
to
you, like,
be you.
it doesn't faze me at all, because I think we really do relate to people. Even
Yeah.
I'm seeing this in like education now too. People want to learn from other people. Like, I will buy a course on YouTube from Ali Abdaal because I like the way Ali Abdaal does YouTube. It's not because it's the only YouTube course out there, or maybe it's not even the best YouTube course, but like, I want to support Ali. I like what he does. And it's really effective to sell a course on X when you've been communicating to me through X. Like, I wouldn't consider myself an authority on email newsletters by any means, but people who've been reading my newsletter for 4 years have been asking, like, how can I build my newsletter? So it's easy for me to say, okay, I'll create an experience or a workshop for you to teach you how I do this. And they like that because it's me and they know my work and they know I do it well and they like that. I think a lot of people think about like, what's the thing that I can make that is so uniquely me that nobody else is doing? And those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. It can still be uniquely you, even if other people are doing it, and your people will be interested.
Totally. I love that. You mentioned patronage. If I'm a creator and I am feeling an aversion to accepting financial support from fans, first, why do you think that is? And what would you say to me about that?
I think a lot of people have some hangups on all things money. And I think about this a lot because I don't know why it is. And I think it's like there's like a certain Midwest guilt that occurred in my life where you think of business as like the bad guy because business is what's paying me as an employee. And that's like what our parents might have told us or something, you know? And when people talk about sales, I had a conversation with Jordan Harbinger about this on the show. When people talk about sales, when they realize something is sales, it's usually because it's a bad experience. But you don't talk about like the great sales experiences because it doesn't feel like sales. So when you're not experienced selling something yourself, your connotation with sales is bad. And you think that asking for money is sales. That is bad. And I think we have to release that a little bit because it's not serving us. It's not serving the people that we could be helping. And I think about like if you go into a Starbucks and you look at the menu, you don't have the barista coming and shouting at you like, what kind of coffee do you want to buy? Like it's, hey, we have coffee here. What do you want? And you say, oh, I want this excitedly. And you walk away and you enjoy the product and you're like, that was great. That's what good sales is. And your work is the same way. Like it doesn't have to be pushy. It's like, I got this. Welcome to my store. Do you want this? And, you know, patronage through like buying me a coffee is so great because I have never once emailed my people or said to my audience, like, by the way, I'm on Buy Me a Coffee. I would love for you to support me. It's just in the footer of every email. And it says, if you want to say thank you, you can buy me a coffee. I've never pointed that out. It's just discoverable. And people do. It is amazing. And it feels great because like I didn't push that on anybody.
Right.
But people want to support the people that they want to support. And there's some part of your audience who wants to support you more than they can right now. And patronage is a great way to unlock that.
Wow. I think that's a lovely way to leave it. Now I'm feeling excited to get some work done today. What's the most exciting thing you're working on right now? Something that you're stoked about?
It's got to be Creative Elements.
Yeah.
I just love making that show. It's a challenge to make it better and better. My fiance Mallory and I just bought this house.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. This basement was an unfinished basement. And when we saw it, she was like, that's going to be your studio. And I said, it looks gnarly. It is not good. And she said, no, trust me. We'll paint it. We'll put new baseboards down. We'll get carpet down there. And now I haven't even like done real soundproofing down here, but the acoustics are already so much better than our old apartment.
That's awesome.
It makes me excited because I know I can make the audio much, much better. And in a podcast, better audio is a better show. So now it feels like there's no limit on how good the show could be because I can make the essential part of it really, really great.
Yeah.
So that gets me excited.
Awesome.
And even like that poll that I ran, you know, I told you my goal with this show is to kind of Trojan horse my way into showing you the paths of people that are having success right now, even if you don't know who they are. And I can tell that people want that. So the challenge is, how do I deliver them that? And how do I get them excited about clicking play in the first place?
Yep.
And that's kind of the challenge that I'm dealing with now, excitedly.
I love that for you. Where's the best place to find your stuff on the internet?
jayclouse.com.
Easy.
And I'm on social media at Jay Clouse.
Do you have Jay Clouse everywhere?
Yes.
Ugh, lucky. That's the dream.
Everywhere except the Gmail address. Because jayclouse@gmail.com appears to be an abandoned email address of somebody who was once hiring for a security position on Craigslist. And it's like an autoresponder, like, if you're applying for the security position.
That's amazing. I had to go the Taryn Arnold. I had to put a the in front of it. And every time I type it, I just hate it. I'm just like so bummed out.
That's why you say, you know what, screw it. I'm going to pay the $5 a month and get a Google workspace account, I think it's called now. And it's just going to be jay@jayclouse.com. Now I got it all. Doesn't matter.
That's so smart. Wow. You leave me with a good tip and another thing I need to work on today. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us. Cheers. I'm actually out of my coffee. I just like so aggressively drank it, but
it's early there. Good morning.
Thanks for coming on the show. Good morning.
Thanks for having me, Taryn.
Yeah.